Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. This week, I'm joined by John Arensmeyer, founder and CEO of Small Business Majority, a support group for and community of business owners. Welcome, John.
Good to be here, Loren.
Great to have you. So John, I want to try to catch up with you. I know it's only January. In some ways, it feels like it's already been kind of a long, confusing year. There's so much going on.
Yep.
I'd like to take your pulse a little bit. Where's your confidence level? You've built your own businesses. You talk to business owners all the time. You're talking to policymakers in Washington, D.C. Where do you think we are?
Well, look, I think there's still, we're still coming out of the pandemic, and there's still a lot of concern among business owners. I think the four areas that we're hearing the most are supply chain concerns, workforce concerns, inflation, and just general uncertainty about where the economy is going, what's going to happen with COVID, et cetera. So those are the four things we're hearing the most.
From your constituents, from business owners?
Yes. Absolutely.
And do you have a sense? I mean, what's your reading on them? I know you there are a lot of people, and people are all over the map. But are people feeling? I know a lot of people are exhausted and frustrated. Are they feeling beaten down? Where do you think their heads are at?
Well, I think it's a combination, and obviously it depends on the particulars of the industry and the particulars of the business. But it's definitely a mixed bag. Look, entrepreneurs, as you know, as well as anybody, are optimistic. We're always looking to the future and always, have a can-do attitude. So I think, that continues. That hasn't changed. But I think that, I just think it's a case of uncertainty, and it's a case of, having to deal with some issues that perhaps were not expected.
A few.
And then there's a lot of externalities that businesses don't really have any control over, particularly the COVID.
All right, so let's pick one of those. We've had a chance for the Supreme Court decision on the OSHA vaccine or test mandate to kind of sink in. Many small businesses weren't affected directly by that because they have fewer than 100 employees. And yet I think many were kind of looking for cover from larger businesses, looking to see what they did, how they handled it. This means that businesses have to make their own decision instead of blaming somebody else or relying on somebody else. What's your sense of how most businesses are approaching that?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Businesses were looking for sort of a guide. Businesses were looking to see what was going to happen with larger businesses. We've surveyed businesses on this, and for 2-to-1, businesses support mandates for public-facing businesses. And
I think that would surprise a lot of people.
Well, I can get into that a little bit. More than half had a vaccine mandate of their own or were considering one. Now, we don't know how that's going to change with the decision by the court. Look, businesses don't want to be traffic cops themselves. They want the mandate gives them cover. So they don't have to step up and do something controversial. And they don't want to wade into what is, let's face it, a partisan issue. So having an external mandate and a standard that sort of our society and our economy was settling on, I think would have been helpful. You've got offsetting concerns among employees in businesses. Many want to come to work in a safe environment. We've heard from business owners across the lot, daycare providers, people in restaurants, that they want to be able to come and work in a safe environment. On the other hand, there's no doubt certain employees who don't want to get vaccinated. So from what we've heard, the former camp tends to be a little stronger than the latter camp. But again, it's putting business owners in a situation where they have to step up and be traffic cop. And it would have been so much better for there to be a standard out there that they could have simply relied on, even if legally they weren't required, and could have said, look, this is where the world's going, and this is what we're doing.
Tell me if you see this the same way. I sense that there's been kind of a shift in one sense, which is that before Omicron, I think the pragmatic view, or what was considered the pragmatic view for many businesses, was not to mandate vaccinations, because if you do, you risk losing employees, and we're in the middle of a labor shortage, and that's, just from a pragmatic standpoint, a really difficult place to be. now with Omicron and it's, it's so transmissible, I think there's some shift there, and the pragmatic view is more, we got to do anything we can to keep our employees and our customers safe so we can stay open, because if Omicron runs through the business, there's just no way we can open the doors.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that there was sort of hesitancy at first. Businesses don't, as I said, they don't want to be traffic cops. They want to sell their product and service. They want to keep their customers happy. And of course, they want to keep their employees happy. And again, businesses didn't know where this was going. We had ups and downs with the original beginning of the pandemic and then Delta. And as you say, Omicron has kind of changed that. We have definitely seen a shift toward businesses, including in our polling, but also anecdotally, wanting to have a safe workplace for their employees and a safe place for their customers. And yes, of course, they are concerned that they're perhaps going to lose employees who don't want to get vaccinated. Had we had the mandate, even on businesses of 100 employees or more, there would have been a greater standard. There would have been more of the economy out there that was requiring vaccination, and it would have put them in a much more comfortable position to require it. But right now, they're facing a situation where employees are worried about coming in to a workplace where not everybody's vaccinated. And I think that you're absolutely right about the shift. And I think because this pandemic has gone up and down and up and down, and now we're seeing Omicron here, I think that they're ready to simply, again, this is not universal, but the majority really want to have some kind of standard and some kind of safety that they can rely on.
Obviously, few businesses have had a tougher time with this than restaurants. I've heard some rumblings that maybe there's a move afoot to try to replenish the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and help out some more restaurants. Do you have a read on that situation?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is actually in the discussion right now. As you know, there are 180,000 pending unfulfilled applications, which is about 2/3 of total applications. So there was about 300,000, almost 300,000 total applications, and they got $29 billion out the door, but that left 2/3 of the applicants, without anything. And on top of that, there was an attempt to prioritize applications from socially and economically disadvantaged groups, which in the first 21 days of RF, but that didn't go very well. And soon there was a lawsuit, and the judge agreed with the lawsuit, rescinding some of the approvals. So that also, we ended up having the same sort of economic and racial disparity that we saw in the PPP and other programs. All of that said, there's now 180,000 pending unfulfilled applications. There is a bipartisan effort in the Senate led by Democrat Ben Cardin and Republican Roger Wicker to get more funding into the program, and actually to get even more funding than was originally in the program, because over half of the applications weren't dealt with. There is interest. We're hearing that there are many Democrats and certainly a certain number of Republicans who want to try to get something done. There are a couple of concerns here. The first is that there's a concern of flying in the face of the narrative that we're moving on and we're moving out of emergency mode, and that, oh my gosh, now we're doing another relief program. And we kind of understand that from a sort of a messaging standpoint. We want to be talking about moving forward. But on the other hand, Omicron's here. So, that's the reality. Secondly, there are many, particularly Republicans, are looking for offsets to cover the funding, which is, about $48 million, $1 billion if it goes through all the way. There's not enough possible spending cuts to get there, and pretty unlikely you get 60 votes for a tax increase to get us there. And finally, there is a concern about inflation. So that said, what we're hearing, and the leadership in the Senate is interested in moving this forward. There is at least meaningful Republican interest in this. And it's one of the few things going on in the Senate right now that actually might get bipartisan traction and might get rolling. I would say there's no guarantees right now, but they're going to try to do something, I think.
Interesting. You said a couple things there that I wasn't aware of, one of which is I didn't realize there were 180,000 applications sitting there that had not been funded. That suggests that if they were able to do this, would those applications still be viable and people could get money without going through that process again?
Well, I mean, we don't know. I mean, no doubt there's some of those 180 may not be viable anymore, but I would say that, and I don't have data on this, I would say that's probably a fairly small percentage. 29 billion got out the door to approximately 100,000. So you've got almost double that waiting. So if they can get, something like 48 billion, that should cover it. And most of those pending applications should still be viable.
All right. So you use the word bipartisan, which is always a little surprising to hear. I'm going to ask you about something else that allegedly has bipartisan support, although I struggle to believe it here, too, a little bit. And that's antitrust legislation. We're seeing stories that there's movement there. Am I right about that? What's your sense?
There is. The American Innovation and Choice Online Act was passed by the Senate Judiciary Committee, passed out of committee the other day, 16-6 vote, 5 Republicans joining. It is co-sponsored by Democrat Amy Klobuchar and Republican Chuck Grassley. It has definite support and co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. I know here we've talked about 2 bipartisan initiatives here. This one really is bipartisan, and you don't get a 16-6 vote in a Senate committee these days, not very much. So I think we should be encouraged that this is something that may be able to move forward.
My sense is that the focus here is on big tech companies that have their own online platforms where they tend to favor their own products at the expense of other, usually smaller businesses. Am I right about that?
You're absolutely correct. It's called self-preferencing, what you're describing. And it's one of many problems out there where the sort of power of very large companies is being used to create an unlevel playing field. All small businesses want is a level playing field. They don't want special treatment. They want to be able to compete on a level playing field. And there's a whole host of concerns out there. But the self-preferencing is what this bill is focusing on. I can get into some of the details on it, but you're absolutely correct. It is really about tech platforms having their own products that they then use all the tricks of, well, I don't say tricks of the trade, but the tools in their arsenal to promote those products at the expense of third-party products being sold on the platform.
It doesn't make sense to get into the weeds on the details here for a bill that has a long ways to go. But can you give us some sense what you think the solution we might be heading toward would be if something were to come of this? Or are we talking about breaking the platform away so that, Amazon has to give up its marketplace? Or is there some other way to fix this problem?
No, this particular bill is not designed to break up the companies themselves, the platforms themselves. It's designed to put in some rules of the road that are going to allow for a more level playing field. It prohibits biased search results. It prohibits requiring businesses to buy preferred placement on a platform. It prevents using business data to compete against them or retaliating against companies that raise concerns to law enforcement. And it gives broad enforcement powers to Federal Trade Commission, to the Department of Justice, and to state attorneys general on this. So it is about setting rules of the road, setting up a system, or at least improving on a system that creates a more level playing field. It's not, this particular legislation is not about breaking up platforms or anything like that.
But from the way you describe it, I sense that you think it could be meaningful and could make a difference to small businesses that are affected.
Absolutely. We hear all the time from small businesses that they feel really disadvantaged on these platforms. And we're talking about big platforms. There's like only about 6 or 7 that would be 5 or 6 that would be affected by this. They feel many of them, most of them feel that they have all sorts of impediments, and that in many cases these platforms are working against them in some ways. Although they obviously are dependent upon the platforms to sell their products. So, I think that this is very squarely going to benefit small businesses.
Do you have any suggestions for a business owner who is looking at this, thinking about it, and would like to lend some support, encouragement to those trying to push the bill?
Well, sure. I mean, not to self-promote here, but if anyone wants to get a hold of us at smallbusinessmajority.org, we'd be happy to. We're talking to business all the time. We're in fact, engaging businesses out there on this topic. We've just done. I'll give you a little sneak preview here. We've just done some pretty extensive research on a whole host of what we call equitable competition issues. This is one that we're analyzing right now. We have a lot of data we're looking at, and we're going to be releasing that, either in chunks or fairly soon. So, and then we are regularly talking to small business owners about this, and we've definitely got businesses in our network who have been affected by this problem.
John Arensmeyer is CEO of Small Business Majority. John, thanks so much for taking the time.
Great, Loren. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Have a great week, everyone.
And we move forward here.
Talk to you again soon, John.